Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another Sunday live stream of Political. The date is the 13th of December 2020, and what a year it's been. But what a week it's been as well. So we're going to be talking about the latest news. A big hello to anybody who's joining us in the chat right now. A big hello to everybody who's watching later. I know quite a few of you do choose to watch later. So a big hello to everybody. As always, please do get involved and please do tell us what you think, whether that be in the live chat, say hello to us and tell us your opinion, or in the comment section down below. Tell us if we're acting particularly stupid. Do feel free to tell us, and we'll explain to you in excruciating detail why we're not. And if you are subscribed, thank you so much, and please continue watching and liking our content. If you're not subscribed already, please do consider subscribing. And otherwise, a big welcome. My name's Connor Allen. I'm here with Ian Smith, as always. So
Hello.
say hello, Ian.
Hello.
I haven't said say hello, Ian, for a long time, have I?
No, not since
Well before the election.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So we'll give it a couple of minutes just now, just to allow people to come into the live chat, I think, if anyone does choose to come and join us. Ian, have you had a good week? Have you been working hard?
Working hard as always. Being an upstanding member of my community. And
you fought against racial injustice?
Obviously. Every day, every hour, every waking moment.
Enough, though?
What's that?
Have you done enough?
Is it possible to do enough?
Well, exactly.
Yeah, no, it isn't. Yeah, lockdown's over. Oh, that was last week actually, but the lockdown is over now. We've had another lockdown, and it's finally. Well, how long was it? Well, you won't know, but I think it was 2 weeks. I don't actually recall. But everything basically that was any good was closed again. And like the good conservative I am, I play golf. So the golf course is open back up again. But it's been raining, so they've not actually been open. So I went to the golf centre, and that was great.
Okay.
I was bad before the lockdown. I didn't play obviously for about 3 weeks, and I'm still bad. So just so everyone is aware.
Okay, so you heard it here first, folks. Ian Smith is bad at golf, which makes him a fake conservative, does it not? But you can be the judge of that, rather than myself. So if you're just joining in, welcome. We are just giving it a couple of minutes just before the stream starts, just to allow people to jump into the live chat. Please do consider dropping a like. Please do leave a comment, and please don't hesitate to engage with us. I posted this on Parler. What do you think of Parler? Because we're both relatively new to it, aren't we? I mean, it's a bit buggy, isn't it? But
it's a bit buggy.
better than Twitter.
Yeah, but I think aesthetically, there's some improvements that can be made. It feels a little bit. It's not archaic, but it's you know, there's still a bit of to go to make it kind of a bit more modernized, I guess. Which obviously it's not the most important issue, but I like Parler. Parler's a better platform, but I think Twitter looks nicer. So I think they need to get they need to get some good designers in and get it looking good, man. So those fact checks and stuff that they had to tweet, so they need to get them on point like Twitter's, man.
Well, I think what they have to do first of all is they have to make sure it works all the time, because there is a long period where we've been posting and it just doesn't post for whatever reason. Maybe it was shadow banned, I don't know. But it still seems
you're conservative now if you shadow banned from Parler.
Well, I think we're shadow banned from YouTube, aren't we? Because we have seen since the election a distinct fewer amount of impressions, haven't we?
Yeah, certainly. It doesn't. It doesn't. The algorithm does not seem to promote, I don't think, as much as it did before. But luckily, we have lots of loyals, maybe not the right word, but engaged subscribers who come and say hello and comment down below, for which we are forever grateful.
Yeah, of course, definitely. But I mean, we've been covering the election fraud, and one of our most successful videos was, of course, talking about election fraud in Georgia. And YouTube's come out and said they're going to ban anyone who dares to discuss it. You can watch our video on it. It was this week. So yeah, I think we've been shadow banned. That's my suspicion. And then Facebook have called us disinformation, haven't they?
I think so, although I don't know for sure, because I just got the notification saying that content you have shared has been fact-checked by an independent fact-checker, and it was rated, what was it? Like, but it was like partly false or something, some wording to that effect. And but I've also been banned from Facebook, so I don't actually know. I just got banned one day, and I had to review it. I don't know why I've been banned, but I had to. I mean, my Facebook account is, over 10 years old. I had a Facebook in school because, obviously you did as well. It was all the rave, wasn't it? So everyone made a Facebook account. And so apparently they're now questioning my identity. I suspect that I've been reported a number of times by angry people, shall we say, and I guess Facebook is just trying to determine whether or not I'm a Russian bot or not, despite, as I say, having a Facebook account for over a decade, and just been, I would say, active, but I suppose I chat to people on there and stuff. So so I don't actually know yet. As soon as my Facebook account is banned or whatever, we'll be able to know whether or not we were fact checked or not. But we only share our own content on there, so it doesn't make any sense really.
It's pretty bizarre, but listen, man. This call comes back to it. You weren't doing enough to fight racism, so now you've been rightfully banned. You bastard. And if you are new to this stream, well, welcome. And it's always good to start a stream with a list of where we've been banned from for this information and all the various institutions who have taken what offense to us, perhaps. But
they're bowing down to the mob, aren't they?
Yeah,
that's effectively the big tech, what they're doing.
Exactly. So yeah, should we start? I'm just going to post the stream on Twitter. So if you fancy going ahead with the first topic,
yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So, I forgot to put the browser in. There we go. Yeah, so you might have noticed from the title, what did we call it? Should the GOP continue voting for Trump? We say this because obviously we had that Million March, the Million MAGA March, or MAGA Million March, a few weeks back now. And there's been some more marching in Washington, D.C., and there's been calls about, destroying the GOP. So let's go through this first anyway. This is from Business Insider. It is quite anti-Trump, to be fair, but this article is kind of I don't know. I wanted to give a certain perspective on what's been happening. So, Trump supporters chanted "Destroy the GOP" at a rally in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, venting their anger at Republican state officials who refused to take part in President Trump's bid to overturn the election result and cling to power. According to footage of the rally posted on Twitter, far-right activist Nick Fuentes addressed supporters attacking the Republican Party and alleging that it had failed to keep Trump in power. Fuentes, in a tweet Saturday, posted a picture of himself addressing the rally and wrote, "We are going to destroy the GOP and transform it into a party that truly puts America first." In the first Million MAGA March, we promised that if the GOP did not do everything in their power to keep Trump in office, then we would destroy the GOP. As we gather here in Washington, D.C. for a second Million MAGA March, we're done making promises. It has to happen now. We are going to destroy the GOP. Are there any more quotes, actually? Well, listen, I think that's the important information. So I suspect this is something that Trump supporters and conservatives are quite divided on, actually, in terms of what to do, the best way forward. Does it feel like a betrayal? How do we, I guess, go about if Biden now does become president? Obviously, the electors are due to meet tomorrow. He's almost certainly going to be certified, and then it just becomes incredibly more difficult, and as time goes on, to be able to do anything about it. So I guess in a world where that happens and Biden is then the president, and then that's just how it is, where do we go from there? What do we do? And I think people are a little bit divided over that, because some people obviously want to feel, like I say, feel betrayed by the GOP, and some people think, well, you know, look, we've lost, or when I say lost, I mean we've lost in terms of votes, or either we've lost the battle to prove, or at least to the court's standard, whatever that may be, that there has been fraud. Certainly they've not really listened to any of it, so I don't know if you can necessarily say that we've not proven it, or at least not proven it to them, because they haven't even listened to it. But I think, you know, there needs to be a sense of continuity in terms of like the conservative movement and the Trump's legacy of where do we go from now and what do we do to continue on down that path that we were on before and limit the amount of damage that a Biden administration could do.
Well, that's quite interesting then. So, do you take the perspective that there is a kind of anti-Trump movement within the Republican Party? Like, do you believe then?
No.
Do you believe then that there is like a significant cell who would like to see the Republicans go back to the old ways, perhaps? Like, what do you think about that?
No, I don't. I think you know, they call it Trumpism, whatever. I think, you know, basically Trump's you know, like the backbone policy of Trump, which is America first, right? That has swept the conservative movement. It's rejuvenated the Republican Party, and I think that unlike what's going on now? Unlike the Democrats, where they have kind of like, you know, this like Marxist movement within the Democrat, like, whereas that, whether I'd probably say that in terms of the lawmakers, they're still obviously more, you know, what they call moderate Democrats as opposed to the radical ones. Whereas in the GOP, I feel like there are far more people that sympathize towards Trump's kind of legacy, or Trump's, I don't want to call it a legacy yet, but Trump's, you know,
His
policy,
revolution.
yeah, his revolution, then there are people against it. So I think Trump is the Republican Party now. But the question is, where do we go from here if Biden becomes president? What do we do about it? How do we go about getting Trump's agenda, you know, back into play, basically?
Oh yeah, I mean, so I mean, if you're talking about getting Trump's agenda back into play, so you think it could be critically damaged in the next few years, then, or rather, you believe that it's a make or break time, right? See, I'm not too sure perhaps I'm putting words in your mouth, so do forgive me if I am.
You are a little bit, but yeah, I'll come back to that.
Because it is a crucial time, and what the Republican Party needs to do, which I think you're alluding to, is to be looking at what Trump did and working out just why it was so successful. Because there's no get beaten around the bush, is it? He's transformed that party from within, from without, and you're seeing a new generation of these kind of Trump conservatives as opposed to the old conservatives. People like John McCain, very well respected. I respect John McCain quite a lot. But if you look at some of the policies he supported, if you look at some of the legacies he had, he was very much, he perhaps was a bit cozy with the bit cozier with the lobby than he should have been. He was perhaps looked at the military-industrial complex as a good thing, as interventions as a good thing, and Trumpism, as you say, has largely kind of dispelled that, because it's so in touch with the people, isn't it? And I think that is the key point, because Trumpism isn't about a set ideology per se, is it? It's more about being in touch with the people and exactly what they want. Because you can't look at Trumpism isn't an ideology. It's a very pragmatic thing that has catapulted not only Donald Trump to prominence, but it made a huge success of Nigel Farage. If you look at the Five Star Movement in Italy, they adopted a lot of things Trump did. It's really been inspirational for the conservative movement. And so the Republicans now need to look at that. They need to look at what has actually happened with Trump, and they have to respect the pragmatic principles, don't they? The worst thing that could possibly happen is to kind of double down on the figure of Trump himself. And if it turns out that he becomes the most unpopular man in the world the next day, then his persona should not influence the ideas he's put into place. I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, like pragmatism, I think, is the key word. And I think this is, like I say, I think the Republican base is maybe a bit divided on the way forward. I think generally people are supportive of Trump and obviously his ideas and his policy among Republicans, that where they're divided is the way to go about it. And I think this line is kind of like key here from Fuentes, where he says, we're going to destroy the GOP and transform it into a party that truly puts America first. So he says transform. If he means we're going to kind of put pressure on GOP lawmakers to fight for the ideas of Trump. I mean, and not just less like, Trump is a once in a generation politician. You don't get many people like that coming along. And hopefully he's going to get another term, whether it's this time round or in 4 years' time. It would be a shame. I think it would be a real shame if he only actually had one term.
Well, okay. Can I just kind of like interject there?
Go on.
Because you say Trump is a once in a generation politician, and you're right in terms of what he emerged from, because he emerged from the wilderness, and in that way he was a once in a generation politician. But don't you think, looking forward for the next 10 years, he has ensured that there are other politicians like him that have come through the ranks, and he's ensured that his ideas have kind of lasted onwards. So in the next 10 years, there are many, many, many different Donald Trumps appearing.
Yeah, perhaps. I think my problem is, and this is the thing that perhaps a lot of people, and if you are watching this and you're you would consider yourself a Democrat, right? I think this is something a lot of Democrats don't realize, is that Trump transcends the GOP. A lot of people voted for the Republican Party for the first time in 2016 and 2020 because they support Trump. They're not necessarily Republicans. Trump cast this broad, this broad tent, this big coalition of voters, because he modernized the Republican Party. And that includes people like me as well. I mean, listen, would I ever in a million years sort of be on board with what the Democratic Party or what the Democratic could be, depending on who's the one that's pulling the strings? No, absolutely not. Like, I completely reject identity politics. But I think what's happened for the past sort of 10 years or so, maybe a bit less than that, what we've seen is a rejection of globalism, and certain parties, certain movements have kind of become the symbolism of that sentiment of anti-globalism. That's what Trump's done in America. That's what Brexit did in the UK. And like you say, there's other examples of it in Europe, although they haven't been as successful yet, at least anyway. But so for me, yeah, you're right. Like that sentiment is now fully instilled in the average Republican voter. I guess what I'm talking about is like, what is now the way forward to make sure that sentiment remains? What we don't want is a Republican Party that goes back to the old Republican Party, that, you know, the Republican Party is as much as the swamp as the Democratic Party. Like you say, just lobbyists who don't care. They don't care about America first. They don't care about anything but in, you know, staying in power themselves and enacting law that is, you know, relevant to their paymasters, the people that put them there in the first place. That's why Trump was so amazing. That's why he's that's one of the main reasons why he was able to reach out across the line and get many people that had never voted Republican before to vote Republican, because they were like, oh, well, don't agree with him and everything. But here's a guy who doesn't seem to have taken like millions and millions in donations from all these various different special interests, and has actually been consistent on his message for decades. I mean, you can go back and see interviews of Trump decades ago talking about the same things, talking about China and talking about America first and this kind of thing. So it was refreshing in politics to see someone that actually stood for something and wasn't paid for by another entity. It's just a case of like, how do we keep that going? Because there's that risk that the Republican Party now regresses back to its old state and becomes a bunch of swamp creatures like it was before.
Well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? Because that's kind of going into the topic of our live stream. Should some voters keep voting for the GOP? Because actually, you know, think of, you know, and here's just a round idea. We were talking about it in just before. Why not form their own party? Because if the Trump revolution is to continue, well, you could have something like the Brexit Party in the UK, which was very, very close to dismantling the two-party system, right?
Yeah.
If there's any movement that could shatter the duopoly of the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States, it's the Trump ideology. I know I said it wasn't an ideology, but, you know, that's what I'm saying. But wouldn't that be spectacular? Because what happens is when you have two parties in power, they never have to compete because they have their own bases and stuff. Like they compete at election time, but they never have to actually stay that in touch with the people. Because if you're a Christian, you're probably going to vote Republican. If you're a progressive, you're probably going to vote Democrat. So they don't actually have to respond to those voters. And what you see over hundreds of years, what we have seen is because of a lack of competition, they've stagnated and they don't really reflect any of the ideas that their voter bases do, which is why in the Republican Party you see Trump voters and Ku Klux Klan members and radical Christians, and in the Democrat Party you see soy boys, cuckolds, and Joe Biden, who is both, but whatever.
Who's all of those things?
Wouldn't it be a great thing to take Trump's energy and that momentum and that snowball and use it to shatter the two-party system in America? Because, you know, if you're talking about 3-4 parties in the mix, well, that would be the greatest legacy anyone has ever left on US politics, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think most people, I think, are generally against the idea of two-party system. It's only one party away from a one-party system, and it often feels that way, doesn't it? Like you don't actually have any choice. You feel like you're making ones, you know, like you say, who knows who will win the ticket for the Republican Party in 2024, right? We saw what happened with the Democratic Party, right? Where not that I'm suggesting that I support Bernie Sanders, but obviously he was shut out, wasn't he, from getting the ticket? And so you don't get that sense of like you're picking the actual people. Trump is a exception to that rule. Typically, you have people thrown in front of you as your decision that you basically didn't really play a part in choosing. And often you go for the sort of lesser of two evils kind of approach. So it may well be that after Trump either does a second term or whatever, that we don't get someone like that again that's really true to those ideas, and we're sort of faced with then that awkward decision of, well, do we vote for like the Democrat, lobbyist who is obviously clearly in the pocket of this particular institution, or do we vote for the Republican lobbyist who's also in the pocket of this particular institution? And then obviously that's terrible situation to be in. So in many ways, like in terms of the long term, yes, it would be great to have far more parties that make things more interesting. But then at the same time, if the Republican Party split into sort of two wings, then you're probably looking at the Democrats winning, forever. So like you can't, it's like, can you take that risk? And that's obviously just that awkward scenario that you end up in. It's obvious that it's not a great scenario to be in, to only have a two-party system. But then at the same time, it's like, can you take the risk of allowing the other party to, gain some kind of supermajority? Because that's potentially what would happen. The Republicans Party split in two now. The Democrats in the next election probably win massive, massive amounts of seats all over the shop, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of, sure. As a pragmatic reason, it probably is the worst possible thing. The other side has to fracture first before we can even think about it, I guess so. But then, so as circling back then, it really seems to be the case that this is going to be the most pivotal 4 years of of new conservatism, as I think we should call the Trump movement. And we have to really crush the old ideas, the old Republican Party, the old out-of-touch party. Otherwise, it's going to be a tug of war for the rest of our lives. And I mean, just look at the amount of Republicans who betrayed Donald Trump this election. If you look at Arizona in particular, it's a hotbed of it, right? Look at how many politicians came out and refused to back Trump.
Yeah.
Died in the war Republicans. They've been in the party 50, 60 years, and they refused to back a Republican president. I mean, what the hell is going on? Those people should have been kicked out of the party, I think, for such... I mean, like, I don't want to say disloyalty, because I think loyalty has to be earned. But when you look at the Democratic Party, and when you're looking at what has just come in, or seems likely to come in, when you're looking at, the potential of a Kamala Harris presidency, which is not beyond the realms of possibility, right?
It's very much it's very much in the center of the realms of possibility, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of dangerous little doggos in the street and that sort of thing. Joe could have a slip at any time. A Kamala Harris presidency. A politician who supports Black Lives Matter unconditionally, who praises rioters, who hugs thugs and Antifa. How could any Republican take any action? How could any Republican look at a Reagan-esque low taxes, low regulation economic machine like Donald Trump and say, no, I'll take my chances with the racial justice warrior, please?
Well, that's it. You can. So I think For me, and this may very well me be an unpopular opinion, but I think what you need to do is, and going back to this quote, when he says transform the party, sure, yeah, transform the party. Trump transformed the presidency, but the party hasn't been transformed yet. Those Republicans are still very much the same Republicans who betrayed the American people over and over and over again. The same Republicans who voted for endless war, you know? So they do need to transform the party. I don't think they should abandon the party. I think they should turn the party into the party that they want it to be. And they should pressure Republican lawmakers now into either supporting the things that they support, new conservatism or whatever it was you called it, or yeah, make them feel that feeling of like, oh, if I don't do this, then if I don't move with the times, then I'm going to get voted out. Make them feel that pressure. Start running candidates against them in primaries. I mean, it feels weird saying this, but do what the Justice Democrats are doing, right? So to the Democrat Party, where this is how they're getting people like, Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in, by running them in the primaries, and these old people that they, these Democrats that they consider like too moderate or whatever, forcing them out of the party. Do that to the Republican Party. Like old neocons, people that support things like endless war, people that sell out Americans' interests and American people for lobbyists, force them out. Run candidates against them in primaries, get rid of them, but don't abandon the party. It's just not pragmatic. You're never going to win elections. You're never going to see change that way. You have to, if there are Republicans who aren't embracing the changes in the party, this anti-globalist sentiment, as I sort of perceive it to be, then make them realize and make them know that they're not wanted anymore, but find someone else, get a different candidate in the primary, and then vote for those when it comes to midterms and general elections.
So, yeah, and I mean, like, this is actually a thing, a tactic that's born through not just in American politics, but across the world, right? In the UK, we had Momentum doing exactly the same for the far left. And what makes it work, and you mentioned the Justice League or whatever they call themselves, and the Democrats. Yeah. So what works with these far left things is because they have a super engaged base, and they have, they have a Twitter brigade, because, AOC can click her fingers and she'll have 5 soy boys on Twitter in California sweep to her defense on no matter the subject, right? What is the right-wing equivalent of that? And that is those people wearing MAGA caps who know the importance of the movement, who are ideologically committed to it, and they're willing to go the extra mile for it. I'm sorry, guys, to have just compared you to soy boys, but obviously there are distinct differences. There is a pool of people who know the importance of this movement and are willing to do a lot to do it. When you say, we should be running candidates against other like 2 moderate Republicans in the primaries, damn right, and we're going to have a great chance of success at it, simply because of the legacy of Trumpism. No big Trump supporter right now is going to go back and go, actually, it's probably all a mistake. What Trump supporter thinks the last 4 years is a mistake? Most Trump supporters look at the last 4 years and see nothing but glory. In fact, most Americans, before COVID hit, looked back and saw nothing but glory from the last 4 years. If you look at the polls before COVID hit, Trump is going to win in a landslide. So that says to me, regardless of the COVID response, Trump was very popular. His economic policy profited, gave profit to millions. It empowered people. That is going to be popular going forward. And we have the means and the ability to ensure that it lasts 1,000 years.
1,000 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, I completely disagree, obviously, with their actual political stance, but I admire the way that the people that are very, very, I don't know, passionate about these things on the left, they have forced the hand of many Democrats. I mean, I think, though, ironically, their policy, the radical leftist policy, is deeply unpopular in American society. Therefore, I encourage them to go ahead and keep, running against other Democrats in the primaries and stuff like this, and getting rid of, what they consider moderate Democrats, because they're going to struggle to win elections if they continue to do that, which obviously I'm perfectly happy with. But the reality is that Trump's policy is actually deeply popular in America. It actually is. People just don't like the man himself, right? Because they're not really ready to have a president like that, because they're so used to, essentially, presidents have just, given them lip service and lied to them and pretended to, be concerned about this or that, and not just spoken the truth and their true feelings. So many Americans just aren't actually ready for a president like Trump, and that's why they don't like him, even though they agree with him in policy. And those people do exist. I know some of those people, they support him in terms of his policy. Like, you can name their policy to him without saying whose policy it is, and they'll be like, oh, I support that. And you say it's Trump's, and they're like, oh no, but I hate him. So those people do exist. I think if these I'm not even gonna, they're not moderate Republicans, right? That's not actually what they are. They're just swamp creatures who happen to be Republican, who don't care about the American people. If those people are unseated in primaries, then the people that they're replaced with, if they embrace Trump legacy, Trump's policy, they're going to win. They're going to win because his policy is incredibly popular. People are sick and tired. I remember growing up as well. I just want to say, like, I remember growing up, especially around the times of like the Iraq War. I was pretty young then, like 10 years old when 9/11 happened and this kind of thing. I was about 10 years old. And around that area, and then the time following on from that, from 2001, people would just talk about America like they're the cause of all the world's problems. And Americans are sick and fed up with that. They're sick and fed up of spending all of this money on military to protect the West from its enemies, to just be told that they're at fault for everything. And you see this as well. You see this kind of like smugness and arrogance, especially from Europe as well. European leaders look down upon people like Trump, and it's like, oh no, it's problematic what you're doing and all this. And it's like, you've benefited from America for years and years and years. They've been paying and footing the bill for your protection for years and years and years. And then you want to look down upon a democratically elected president and basically insinuate that half the population is racist or whatever and all this. It's like, that's why American people feel this way, and I'm completely sympathetic towards it. Like, I feel that way as well. I think it's ridiculous the way that the country is treated and looked down upon by other countries. So, I forget the original point that I was making, but
Yeah, you've gone off on a big tangent.
Yeah,
there.
but like ultimately, yeah, Trump, go Trump.
Well, I mean, I don't think people in just to answer your second point, I don't think people in Europe necessarily dislike America to the point you express. And the thing is, you've got to remember, we have a mainstream media too, don't we? We have a dedicated. I mean, think how many people read the Guardian in the UK, and if you go into the Guardian at any point, it's going to be like, oh, the US soldiers eat babies, and things like that. And we're not unless you're political nerds like us, we're just not attached to how things are in America. We don't know how things are in America in general. All we have are these drips of information. Oh, US drones kill civilian or whatever. US drones do this, US soldiers do that. And it really does that kind of drip, drip, drip of anti-American propaganda, which is a form of anti-capitalist propaganda, coming from places like The Guardian, really does turn people over time. And then you have someone like Trump. How many Europeans dislike Trump without knowing a single policy that Trump puts forward? How many Europeans think Trump is a racist? Everyone knows he isn't, but our mainstream media drip feeds us that lie. It's crazy. And yeah, I mean, just kind of going back to again to your original point about kind of the
taking
effect
over
of taking over the Republican Party and stuff. I think it's really important as well that Trump supporters fight the good fight online. Because if you look at the part of the success of the far left, it's because they're infiltrating young people's minds by winning the argument online. And they don't win the argument by debating. They don't win the argument by speaking with people. They don't win the argument by dismissing points. They win the argument by cancelling people eventually, right? They win the argument through shouting down people. But we've got to shout louder, and we've got to, fight back against these people who hate freedom of speech and hate democracy. And there's a number of organisations that are key to that. Like, do you know Turning Point?
I don't know Turning Point, no.
Okay, so that's a student-led organisation, and it's kind of pro-Trump, pro-conservatives in the UK, that sort of thing. Outlets like Breitbart, people like Ben Shapiro, all these things are capable of winning the battle online, and kind of wresting these websites like Twitter away from the soy boys and the yes queens of the world. We need to shout, and we need to shout loud.
No, I agree with that. Agree upon that. Absolutely, 100%. We need to take back. I don't. It's not a case of control. I was going to say take back control, but it's not a case of control. But in the universities, we can't just be pushed aside for having a different opinion that's completely legitimate, and then just accept it and go, well, okay, we're not going to talk about it in the universities, but we're going to talk about it on Parler. It's like, no, because that's not good enough. Like, those people, we're abandoning a generation and subjecting them to an indoctrination of, the woke left's ideology that is the only one that's allowed to be spoken about. A whole generation of people now going into universities, being exposed entirely to one set of one radical ideology and not experiencing the other side, the other opinions. And yeah, so like you say, you can't just abandon those people. You have to be in the universities, and you have to be have that online presence and stuff, where you're making sure that the voice is still heard. And it's just about kind of creating that that environment of discourse where conversations are happening and people are being exposed to different ideas. In a way, we're abandoning the next generation if we don't continue to do that, and we're just allowing them to be just exposed to this sort of in this completely one-sided environment, and that's a betrayal of the next generation, really, the way I see it. You have to. It's all right just saying, oh, and speaking out against the left here on YouTube or whatever and all that, but actually don't back down in situations. You've got to make sure that you're not being a coward, really, in many ways, because you're afraid of the mob. And I don't know. I feel like I tried my best to maintain that sort of way of thinking, and I'm never afraid to express myself about things politically. Obviously, there's always a time and a place to talk about politics, but don't be afraid to speak your opinion about things if it is appropriate to talk about politics or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many people who are just afraid of that reaction, aren't they? You say, "Oh, I'm a conservative," and people go, "What? You're racist?" Well, those two things don't have to be congruous. Those two things don't have to be the same thing in people's minds. But because of the narrative that has been set by these tech savvy left wingers, that's the association people make. And that is sad because I think very few of us are actually racist. There's nothing about wanting a free market economy and less government that makes you like inherently racist, is there? There's
Yeah.
nothing about opposing tearing down statues of the past that makes you a racist. So, but speaking of racism, I mean
Yeah,
that's
I was
kind
about
of
to
a good
say.
lead in for the next point, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know how well known this story is in the States. But essentially, yeah, I mean, I imagine you guys would have heard of obviously things like Champions League being basically the biggest competition in club football. If you're not in it, you're basically a non-club. And obviously, there are some clubs that aren't in it or have been knocked out of it recently, and obviously they're irrelevant now. So what happened over this week during midweek was play was suspended in a game because someone said that they were, the victim of racial abuse or whatever. And in the same way that the NFL has been sort of taken over by wokeism now, and they have all the Black Lives Matter stuff and all that, you kind of have a little bit of that now in European football. They do kind of like this, take the knee before the game starts thing and all this, and they have like little Black Lives Matter chyrons and stuff come across the screen. And obviously that, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come back to the points, but I want to read the story first, actually. So the fallout for the Champions League clash between Istanbul, I can't say this name, can I?
Başakşehir.
Başakşehir.
Don't you know Turkish?
No, unfortunately not. Istanbul, Başakşehir, and Paris Saint-Germain has taken a new twist after footage appeared to show the Turkish bench calling the fourth official a gypsy. Okay, right, okay. So the context of this is that this bloke here, what's his name? I don't know his name. Oh yeah, Pierre Weibo.
Don't say the black one.
Yeah, don't say that one. He's like the assistant manager of the Istanbul team, and he said that one of the referees called him
the black one.
Yeah, no, but well, yeah, but he was basically saying that he would call him like a Negro, right? And in Romanian or whatever, the word is obviously quite similar to that. So because it's because it's like
the word for black.
Yeah,
and it's like negro.
Yeah, in Latin, basically any like Romanic language or language that sort of derives from Latin is going to have something similar, some similar word to that effect. And you've seen basically like in a bunch of Latin languages they have that, right? And
like Spanish.
Yeah, definitely. I think basically that is the word for black in multiple languages, right? And that's obviously where it comes from. And he was basically saying that he's being racist. And then, so then the argument became not, oh, he said this slur, but rather, oh, it doesn't matter whether or not it was intended as a slur. What he said is just offensive anyway, right? Even though he's just saying a word in his own language, right? Because he was referring him to as the black one or whatever. I think the comments are down below, actually, anyway. So it says, footage released by Romanian channel Digi24 has emerged, and a voice with a reported Turkish accent in the background appears to make a derogatory remark in English towards Sebastian. Oh man, I don't know.
Coltescu.
Coltescu, the fourth official in question. In my country, Romanians are gypsies, he says. Both incidents, the comment made at Weibo and the one directed at Coltescu, are investigated, and the latest update has applied to UEFA for the official to be banned for life for his comments, which is incredible. So I want to get the actual comments. So what are the actual comments that the bloke said?
The fourth
official, yeah.
He called him the black one. He was being disciplined. He was the assistant manager was sent off the pitch, and the fourth official pointed to him and said, "Yeah, that's the guy, the black one."
Yeah. Yeah. So he says like, oh man, the quote was definitely in the article, but I can't find it now. But he says, yeah, he basically says, "Oh, the black one or the black guy or something like that. The black guy, that's the one. You need to book him." It's basically saying that he needs to have a card. I assume he was like shouting or something on the sideline and being quite animated. And sometimes they'll go and like book the managers or whatever if they're doing that kind of thing. Anyway, so the point of it, the whole point of it is, there's actually nothing inherently racist in what the guy said, it seems, unless he did actually, call him some kind of derogatory slur, which I don't imagine that he did. It seems now basically everyone's agreed that that's what he said. He just referred him to as the black guy. But people are now trying to kind of claim that this is like somehow racist, that, oh no, you can't identify people by the color of their skin. I mean, I don't know about in other countries, but in the UK, when you like sign some kind of like official governmental form or something, that is the when you're putting in your ethnicity, that's one of the options that you refer to yourself, that you think of yourself as black, right? So how is it offensive to call someone black? It doesn't really make any sense. But apparently now we're led to believe, those on the left are now telling us that if you refer to someone as black, that's now somehow racist.
It's utterly ridiculous. Like, so the guy has literally just described him. There were a group of people, and he happened to be the black one, so he said it's the black guy. Okay, he is black. The weird thing is, if you say he's not black, then that's denying him his heritage and this sort of thing. And can I just say, it's nothing to do with the fact that the assistant manager was being sent off and disciplined at the time. It couldn't possibly be the case that he is calling someone a racist because he has just been punished for his actions, right? Like, to deflect, perhaps. Because it actually boggles my mind. And if you look at the people who flocked to the defense of the assistant manager, I mean, Jose Mourinho said that it was, a pivotal turning point in the fight against racism. The only racism on display was the assistant manager calling him a gypsy. Utterly incredible. And this kind of political double think, the fact that you can't challenge them, it's so rife in every aspect of our media today. And beyond sports, Ian, I'm not sure if you saw the Cyberpunk 2077 video game. And if you look at the reviews for that game, and the reviews say, oh, well, there's only options for 2 genders in the character creation screen, so that's a black mark in my book. And it's just, why has wokeism been allowed to infiltrate every section of the media, of entertainment in our society?
Can I just interrupt you there, because we've had just a few comments I've noticed. One from the Impeccable Living, he says, all members of the GOP that helped Trump try and steal the election should be thrown out. They are ideological traitors and don't want a democracy. So I don't really see it that way. And I'd love for you to, if you'd like to comment again and reply to what I say now, but people, you say they try and stole the election. I think what they basically did is they supported either an investigation or they supported a court case that supported court cases that go to court, and then people, obviously the courts rule upon that. They're not trying to subvert anything, are they? I mean, if anything, going through the courts to challenge an election is very much the way in which you do it, right? If you're trying to challenge an election. If you're trying to subvert the election, then you just ignore the decision, don't you? And try and take power anyway, like through, like militarily or something like that. So I don't know if that's, I don't know if I would call it trying to steal the election.
And hello to Occupy Dogtown, who's a big commenter of ours. Dogtown, welcome. It's nice to meet you finally. But what comment did you make? Because you said read mine.
Oh,
but
does it not show you up? So he says anyone who thinks this election has any legitimacy whatsoever is either actually mentally retarded, as ignorant as a toothless hillbilly, or fucking lying piece of shit. I don't know if we can swear on YouTube. I assume we can.
Of course you can.
Only an imbecile would keep parroting the whole unfounded claims line over and over as if that would make any more true, other than the pathetic Russian collusion story. So I think, and I'll let you come in obviously to this, Connor, but I think for me, like, my biggest issue with the whole thing is, and I said this earlier on in the stream, the courts haven't even looked at the cases. They've just dismissed them. And it's like, well, why aren't you even allowing the conversation? And what really annoys me as well is the way the mainstream media like tries to make it out like there's absolutely zero evidence that there could possibly be any fraud. It's like, no, there's lots of irregularities. There's hundreds of sworn affidavits of people alleging fraud. These aren't trivial matters. These are serious things that should be talked about. And when you have one side of the media basically downplaying the whole thing like it's nothing, and essentially kind of trying to gaslight Americans into thinking that actually, yes, this is the safe. Can you believe that he said that this is the safest election of all time? It's like, how can this possibly be the safest election of all time?
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, Dogtown. Like, for some reason, your comments weren't appearing to me. But okay. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They've just kind of suppressed all coverage of this. And do you know what's funny? So every time a legal case gets defeated in court, right, they portray it as a death blow to Trump's plans. So he's had about 10 death blows at the moment, like by my count. And you just have to think, like, well, what? And it's just ludicrous because for the last
we've lost him. Hello.
Results of the media, including we need to move on now. Hello.
Yeah, sorry. We just lost you for that last bit. You said that again.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So I mean, they've just tried to brush it out, like brush it aside, and trying to move on at every stage of the election. And that's not how democracy works. That's not how legal challenges work. You can't project a result before all the arguments are heard. And then Dogtown says again, he's watched them rig elections for decades. We all know who is behind them. It's not just the Democrats and GOP. Who is it, Dogtown? And it's a death blow to the democratic process. What do you think of that, Jan? Is it a death blow?
I think the way in which things aren't even being discussed, the way in which that like everything is just being either like down, like how many times have we said this before when we've talked about in some of their videos, like no other country, okay, there are a few countries, right? But if I remember, we looked at that Wikipedia and it was like list of countries that use electronic voting in the world, and it's like you look at the countries, it's like America, and then it'd be like Venezuela and Russia or whatever, and all of these countries, like, well, hold on, they're not actually in good company there. People don't use electronic voting systems because they facilitate fraud so much, and it just drives me crazy as someone outside of that sort of leftist media bubble to see people talk about electronic voting machines like they're just completely safe and the safest things ever, and they're trying to like downplay any issue, right, with electronic voting machines. And it's like, no, they facilitate fraud. Absolutely. We've seen videos of people who've basically got a voting machine and they go, oh, look, this is what you can do if you're alone with a machine for a couple of minutes. And then they basically crack open the front of the screen and put a little USB stick in it or something. And suddenly now they're in control. And it's like, it's incredible. It's actually incredible that the media wants to try and like gaslight people into thinking that electronic vote machines are perfectly safe, so far that they call it the safest election ever. It's ridiculous. All I want to see, and all I think most people want to see, is they just want to see a fair, honest investigation into things. You have a sitting president who's claiming that fraud has taken place. He has a legal team who have presented like I say, hundreds of affidavits of people that back up the claims, and all of the voting irregularities to go with it in terms of statistical anomalies. And that's not worth talking about. That's not worth investigating. No, that's ridiculous.
I think because Dogtown's saying that it's the CIA who are to blame for this. And I kind of disagree with that a bit, Dogtown. I don't think there's any like kind of centralized authority behind it that's orchestrating a dominion, like you were saying, Ryan, that's orchestrating all of this. What's happened is anyone who works in the CIA, anyone who's in the Dominion staff, they've all gone through the university system, as we were saying before. When you go through the university system, you're fed this far left, radicalized ideas and this dogma, and you're told that if you don't do something to fight against Donald Trump, if you don't do something to fight against the rise as what they say fascism, then you are a bad person. So you have all these people entering the CIA, you have all these people entering Dominion, you have all these people entering Congress. What do you think is going to happen? And you see that with the Hunter Biden story, which we should talk about today, by the way, Ryan. That it's only coming out now, and it turns out that AG Barr sat on it for ages, and it turns out that all the law enforcement people sat on it, and this is miraculously released just after the election where it could do no damage. It really does say to me that something is going wrong. What do you think of that, yeah?
I think there's absolutely no doubt about it that the intelligence community is in a kind of marriage with the Democratic Party. And like you say, that goes from Bill Barr. I don't know if I necessarily say he's in a marriage with the Democratic Party, but I think there's a lack of a backbone. I think there's a lack of a backbone of people just afraid to do what is basically the right thing because they're scared of this leftist mob that just comes and attacks and hunts people down. And that's really what one of the key issue is when we were just talking about that before, people don't speaking out about things. But certainly the FBI, it's obvious. Surely it's obvious to anyone right now when you look at the FBI's behavior, the way in which they lied.
They have a stake in it, don't they?
Yeah, they lied to the courts to sort of carry out surveillance on Trump's campaign, spying, you might also want to call it. They didn't. They deliberately sat on the Hunter Biden laptop and this just before the election. And Dogtown's talking about the CIA. Well, they were involved as well. We've seen that as well coming from the what was it? The report. Anyway, I've forgotten who actually ran the report, but the Horowitz report. The Horowitz report into the which was kind of like a report on the Mueller report, essentially. And so we've seen that as well. The intelligence communities have been acting in a partisan fashion for some time now, it feels, certainly over the 4 years that Trump's been president. And they've not been held accountable for it either. So, yeah, I do think certainly when we're talking about election rigging or whatever, we're not actually even just talking about mail-in ballots or voting machines or whatever. We're talking about a very concerted effort, a marriage among various institutions to favor one party or the other, and that's what happened.
I just have a quick comment there. Dogtown says he posts this stuff on LinkedIn, which makes him a braver man than me, for certain. The last time I posted something on LinkedIn, it was an article about the Black Lives Matter protests, and I said we probably shouldn't tear down statues, and I got about 200 death threats and got called a racist. So you're much braver than me, Dogtown. What do you think of the Alexandra Acosta game?
I don't have a particular opinion at the moment on such a thing.
Yeah.
Because I want to kind of like I don't want to get I mean, we're literally talking about fraud all during the week, and I feel like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could
There's some
catch
other
up
stuff.
to us.
Yeah,
You
there's a
know,
bunch of different things.
we got to be careful now.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we're gonna come back to some of this other stuff later on as well in the stream, because we've got some of the other a couple of other articles that we're talking about. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, Dog Down. Yeah, I really appreciate you dropping in anyway and sending some messages about this specifically. What do you think about this? I don't know if you watch football or anything at all, but have you seen anything about this story going on happened earlier this week in the Champions League?
As you joined, we were in the middle of a rant about wokeism.
Yeah. But so anyway, going back to this with the Champions League, the fourth official here, what really bugs me more than anything is it's like, yeah, you can make a case that maybe you could say, oh, it's a bit unprofessional. I don't really think it is, to be honest with you, but you might be able to say, yeah, it's a little bit unprofessional for him to like refer to someone as the black guy or whatever. I think we all basically have done that anyway in terms of speech. I know, and I've been referred to as the white, as white in a crowd or whatever. On multiple occasions as well. I can think of a bunch of occasions that's happened because it's just perfectly normal, rational behavior. People's race is a characteristic that they have, and sometimes you can distinguish people by that. It doesn't mean that that's the only thing that you see. It just means that if you're referring to someone in a crowd and say, oh yeah, that black guy, that's a perfectly normal thing to do. So what really annoys me is the way that they're just trying to like create this narrative here that that's always been bad. No, it hasn't. People have always done that. It's never really been an issue before. But all that's happened is because someone has called out racism because of this, they just have to back them, no matter how illogical the claim is.
Yeah, and you were saying it's a characteristic, but it's a pretty obvious characteristic as well. Like nobody points to a person in the crowd and goes, "Yeah, that gay man over there," right? Because that would seem to suggest some sort of like prejudice. But you can't tell a gay person in a crowd normally unless they have like, I don't know, tight leather pants on and the rainbow flag. But in general, you don't see that. So there's a group of people, the guy's black, you say that's a black guy, and suddenly you lose your career for saying that black guy should be sent off. Like that's utterly crazy. Race war psyops are their specialty. Do you think it's psyops? I mean, like I said, I don't think it could ever possibly be one unified effort that would imply psyops, but it's kind of like a cell-driven one, right? Like we've got a generation of radicalized people who push this agenda, and it all snowballs and it amounts to something that looks like psyops.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's just kind of like semantics. It's more just like a. It's funny because it was always the left that would talk about the right saying that the right are gaslighting or whatever, that Donald Trump gaslights. I feel like the biggest perpetrators of gaslighting are the mainstream media on the left specifically, because, and you saw actually in the election as well how they would just turn narratives like that. They'd be like, oh, no, yeah, we've always been against violence in the protest. One moment they're refusing to acknowledge the violence. No, we've always been against that. And it does in many ways, like I understand what you're saying, because it does in many ways feel like this psyops tactic, because you start to sort of question your own sanity a little bit. And you're like, well, hold on, has Biden always been for fracking? I'm sure I heard. But then CNN have fact-checked it, and they said that he is... I don't know anymore. Oh, what do you mean they've always called out the violence? I thought that they refused to accept that Antifa existed and that they said that the protests are mostly peaceful. Now they're saying that the violence is bad. I don't know. Maybe I just missed that. That's so it does sort of make you feel a little bit insane at times when it must be quite difficult being a Democrat, because you're just fed these changing narratives all the time, and you're like, well, hold on, I'm a bit confused now. I thought we were for that, not against that. I don't know anymore.
So it's the cliche, but it's the 1984. We've always been at war with Asia.
Yeah.
Moment,
Well,
isn't it?
I didn't want to invoke that analogy just because it's very
Yeah,
overused,
it's
isn't
overdone. Yeah,
it?
but I mean, the next one's going to be Hunter Biden, isn't it? Because when Hunter Biden comes up in the mainstream media, it's going
Yeah.
to be like, yeah, we always reported on this. Of course
Yeah.
we did. Yeah. And okay. I mean, we have the video evidence. Fortunately, we have the video evidence that nobody bloody covered Hunter Biden. 2020 is 1984. Not quite off there, Dogtown. Not quite off.
Yeah, certainly. Anyway, shall we just take a quick break now anyway for
Yeah, well,
for 5 minutes?
Let's go for a couple of minutes. Yeah,
We'll call this the halfway
Dogtown though.
point.
Yeah, I mean, like Dogtown. I mean, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but you've mentioned Mosaic Wall, MK triggering, IARPA. Like, I don't know what these things are. Do you know, Yo? Like, maybe you
don't
could
know,
like,
no.
I don't know if you have like a quick summary for us that we'll look at when we get back. But if it's too much like effort, like obviously,
Yeah.
your time's valuable too, eh?
But yeah. Anyway, we'll be back in 5 minutes or so.
Well, thanks for dropping in then, mate.
Yeah.
Enjoy the game.
American football. Oh, you still watching that? Bloody hell. All right. Well, fair enough anyway. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I still watch the Premier League despite I have to listen to all of the
You were
Black Lives
complaining
Matter
about
stuff,
it
yeah.
so much before the season started. It was always, yeah, I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to watch it.
That's
And
not
then you
necessarily
did.
true. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, thank you for dropping in, Dogtown. We'll see you. Well, see you next time, hopefully, mate.
Yeah, we do it every Sunday, mate. 5:30 onwards Eastern time. Oh, sorry, 2:30.
2:30. Yeah.
I said 5:30. I meant 15:30, but like actually is 14:30 onwards.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. Cheers for dropping by. Anyway, we're just gonna go for a quick break now for 5 minutes, and I'll see you guys in a bit.
And we are back from our little tea break. Thank you so much for being patient. Hello to everyone out there. Yeah, and I just coming back from the break, I want to say a big thank you for everyone who's popped in and left a message, especially you, Dogtown, a long-time commentator and subscriber. We really appreciate it. And to everybody else, these streams are a lot more fun when we do get the audience participation. So thank you so much, guys, and hope that you come back for more. And speaking of that audience participation, we had a comment during our break. I think you're running a bit behind Wolfgang Felix, but that's not a problem. Red versus blue equals USA. Stick a fork in it. Now, I think he's referring there back to my comments on the dual party system. And so basically, if I understand your point right, you're saying that's the way America does it, right? Well, not necessarily, because if you look in previous elections, you will find the two-party system only emerges after, is it 1830 or 1840? But in the 1800s, there's a huge tradition of independent candidates, and there's a huge tradition of third-party candidates. Just before the Civil War, I believe, there were third parties emerging. So I think there is a tradition there, and I don't like how that tradition's been lost, because the whole crux of the matter is when you compete, you are forced to make your ideas as good as possible. You have to make sure that your ideas resonate with the people. But if you're in a segment of society which will always vote Republican, then the Republicans are never going to address exactly what you want, are they? Because there's no need. They know you're going to vote for them, and they know you're going to prefer them over the Democrats. So I say that if you introduced a couple more parties into the US system, it would be very, very responsive to voters. And, barring once in a lifetime, as you said, Ryan, politicians like Donald Trump, who managed to reach out and appeal to black communities as a Republican, which basically seemed unheard of. Well, actually, if there's if the Green Party was bigger than it is right now, then that would be the case of the Democrats. The Democrats would be forced to refine their approach to minorities and black people, and they would be forced to actually take action to secure that vote. So I think it could be a good thing for democracy. That's what my response to that is.
The question is, isn't it? The issue is who is the first to who's the first to strike in that regard, because you put yourself at a massive disadvantage if your side, Republican side or Democratic side, is the first one to split. There is obviously a clear divide though in the parties, isn't there? I think more so with the Democrats, but in fact we'll come to that. I mean, that's literally kind of what we're talking about now in many ways. So
just before that though, have you seen these reports that it might have been the Libertarian Party votes that cost Trump the win in, I can't remember, it might have been Wisconsin, but I'm not too sure where the Libertarian Party ran. But that's evidence of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite close in a number of states that obviously that sort of 1 or 2% that Libertarian Party picks up would be enough. I think it's probably safe to assume that the majority of Libertarian Party voters, if they couldn't vote for the Libertarian Party, would have voted for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not voted at all, I don't know. But yeah, so certainly like they had more support than the Green Party, didn't they? Which you would expect to be, almost again majority Democrat supporters if they couldn't vote for the Green Party. So yeah, it's certainly feasible, but for me, I don't really like that idea of kind of blaming people for voting for a party. Like if they wanted to vote for Libertarian, then vote for Libertarian. It's up to Donald Trump to earn their vote in that regard.
Yeah, sure. No, I get that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, anyway, speaking of which, this is kind of, I think, speaks testament to the fracture within the Democratic Party, because we've got this article from Fox News, and Black Lives Matter have come and, here's the funny thing, isn't it? Is I've heard multiple times people, Democrats say oh, Black Lives Matter isn't really an organization. It's like it's a ideology, or it's a belief, right? How do they make an official statements then? Exactly, right? They are a political organization. That's it. And they have policies, which is why it's insane that they're, in the UK, in the Premier League, in football or soccer, they're plastered all over it, because it's like they're a political party. Well, not party, but they're a political organization, and what promoting them, it's crazy. Anyway, so this is what Black Lives Matter have said, officially made in a statement. They said, for a newly elected administration that ran on promises of racial justice, to ignore our ongoing requests to meet with them and refuses a seat at the table is demeaning to our movement. It's demeaning to our hurt and trauma. It's demeaning to the countless times we took our protests to the streets to call for justice for our black brothers and sisters taken from us at the hands of police. To set up a meeting with civil rights leaders without BLM, it is unacceptable, BLM tweeted. And here's possibly the reason why that's been the case. Because Biden said, I think this was in that leaked audio recording, was it? Yeah. He said that's how they beat the living hell out of us across the country, saying that we're talking about defunding the police. We're not. We're talking about holding them accountable. We're talking about giving them money to do the right things. We're talking about putting more psychologists and psychiatrists on the telephones when the 911 calls through. We're talking about spending money to enable them to do their jobs better, not with more force, with less force and more understanding. And I
changed
think
their tone a bit, haven't they?
Yeah, it says President-elect Biden is the same person behind closed doors that he is public, honest, direct, and realistic about the challenges facing our nation the day he is sworn in. As he made clear throughout the campaign, he believes in supporting bold and urgent reform to our criminal justice system while continuing to support law enforcement missions to keep our communities safe. And that's basically just a fence-sitter argument, isn't it, really? I mean, it's just political lip service. It doesn't mean anything. There's literally nothing there. Oh, I support bringing down crime. That's like, oh, really? Oh, my God, let's go vote for that guy.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the crux of this article, though, really is like Biden's going to have to balance the radical left with kind of some more centrist policies. And they're making their move, aren't they? And we've seen for the last few months, we've seen so many moves by the radical left. We've seen they feel emboldened, don't they? If you look at the cancel culture, if you look at the celebrities that have been targeted, it really, for these people, the so-called election win of Joe Biden, I probably shouldn't say so-called with YouTube's new policies, but whatever, is for them the herald of a new dawn where they can do whatever the hell they like. And they're taking advantage of it. And so when you have Black Lives Matter demanding a meeting with the president, now listen, not just everyone gets meetings with the president, okay? He's not even president yet. Why would the Black Lives Matter be present for the formation of the Biden cabinet? Why would Black Lives Matter be present before he actually has any control over policies? But they're not. They shouldn't be there. The reason they're demanding a meeting with him is because they see themselves as telling Biden what to do. They see themselves as having won the battle. They see themselves as now having the right to dictate to the president of the United States exactly what they should do. And voila.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I do this sort of infighting among the Democrats. We've seen this in the past sort of couple of weeks when they were talking about, the Democrats did nowhere near as good in the Senate or the House. Well, the Senate, obviously. Well, yeah, they expected to take the Senate, right? And at best, they're going to have 50-50. Yeah. So, and the same with the House. They lost considerable amount of seats. You had Republicans, gaining in places where they haven't done in a long, long time and all of this. And it's clear that there's been a rejection of something that the Democrats are offering, right? And so the radical lefts are like, oh no, they're rejecting moderate Democrats, and the moderate Democrats are saying, oh no, they're rejecting the radical left. They're rejecting these ideas like defund the police. It seems that, you know, Biden has basically been trying to walk this line, hasn't he, of trying to appease people like BLM and all this, while at the same time trying to seem like a somewhat sane choice for presidency by appealing to the moderates as well. Like, I think Biden, obviously throughout his career, has been, I wouldn't say he's not exactly been a champion of racial justice and this kind of thing, has he? This is kind of the first time we've heard this kind of lip service from him. So those
monolith communities,
yeah. But just the whole situation that the Democrats face now, I mean, if Biden takes the presidency, I think they're really going to tear themselves apart over the next 4 years. And for the Republicans, it could just be a case of don't tear yourself apart, going back to what we were talking about before, don't tear yourself apart as well. Put pressure on lawmakers to continue that America First, idea. And let the Democrats tear themselves apart. Expose all of the fraud that's been going on. Expose, and like I say, just expose the rigging. And when I talk about rigging, I'm talking about not just, the claims about election fraud. I'm talking about the way that all of these institutions stood together to try and stop Trump. Expose that for what it is, and let the Democrats scramble to try and appease their very, very, very... It's not really a coalition, is it? It's a very fractured coalition.
Well, yeah, I mean, barely a coalition. It's a group of, unrelated political viewpoints that have somehow banded together for this. When you're saying they'll tear themselves apart, they definitely will, because this is a party that has, on the one hand, Beto O'Rourke, and on the other hand, the Squad, and cozies up to Bernie Sanders to give them direction, right? And not only that, this is the party that has, for the last few months, been advocating cancelling people for disagreeing with them. They don't have the ability to talk to people they disagree with. They don't have any unity in the party. And the man who's meant to be uniting them, well, I mean, we've all seen Joe Biden's efforts at uniting the nation. What makes him think he's going to be able to unite the party? He hides from any confrontation. He hides from any criticism of himself. So, like you say, Aaron, I mean, you are right. They're going to tear themselves apart. They're going to crash and burn. And a wise Republican, a wise Trump supporter would add fuel to that fire, because all we need to do is say to Joe Biden, well, look, why is it that Nancy Pelosi is saying this, but you're saying that? Why is it that and don't even get me started on Nancy Pelosi in China and this, that, and the other. Why is it that prominent members of your party are actively criticizing you and disagreeing with you and not getting behind you and not speaking to you to make things better? Because there's no answer for it, is there?
The reality is, going back to, just talking about what's in the article, the Black Lives Matter, the reality is that this idea of defund the police is deeply unpopular. People do not want to do that. They quite like having the police come and protect them in the case of, someone trying to burgle their home or something along those lines. They quite like having that service, and they certainly don't want to defund it. It's madness, really, most countries, the left, talk about increasing the police budget. And in America, you have this complete opposite. And I hear this all the time where they say, oh no, defund the police doesn't mean defund the police. It means reform the police. And it's like, well, reform the police is just as catchy a tagline, it's also, 5 syllables. So, in fact, I think it's better. I think reform the police sounds better, doesn't it, than defund the police? So if that's what you mean, reform the police, then say reform the police. It's because they don't mean reform the police. They want to defund it. They want to get rid of it. And if they didn't mean that, then why is the council in Minneapolis, why have they now gone ahead with, what was it, like 8 million or something?
8 million.
8 million they've reduced from the budget, right?
And why is it applauded in Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, it's like, obviously, that's what it means. Like, what? Are you going to reduce 8 million out of a budget? And then they go, oh, no, that's not what we meant. Oh, what? Yeah. What are you doing? Like, that's not going to happen. They're going to go, yeah, we won. They took 8 million out of the budget.
Well, in fairness, it could just be the case, hear me out, it could just be the case that the reforms increased efficiency so much that they just didn't need the 8 million anymore, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that the left is too massively concerned about the government being more efficient about taxpayers' money, in all honesty. I don't think that's high on their list of concerns.
No.
But so we already saw it. I'm really interested to see what will happen with Nancy Pelosi. Do you think that she will actually be elected as Speaker again?
I'd be very, very surprised if she did, because I think the ideal speaker is not someone who comes up with a new controversy every week. And so far this week, she's broken lockdown rules. This year.
Yeah.
She's broken lockdown rules. She's facilitated Chinese spying on the intelligence committee. What else has she done? It's such a long list. I can't actually remember every single point on it. But it's huge, right? She's not exactly someone who's unifying. She's not exactly someone who's respected on both sides of the aisle, or even one side of the aisle. I think it's time for Nancy to go, isn't it?
Yeah, we spoke about this actually before. I remember in the run-up to the election. I'd really just love to see the Democratic Party go through a kind of reformation in the same way that the Republicans have done a little bit with Trump. Because they're still run by dinosaurs. Nancy Pelosi is the speaker. Joe Biden is their candidate. These people have been around for decades. They've been around for decades. And they're obviously quite out of tune, I think, anyway, with a lot of the things that people on the left are actually advocating for now. And, I think they just really need that kind of revitalization. There are a few in there, and we're talking about Tulsi Gabbard afterwards. And I think, I disagree with Tulsi Gabbard on some things, but I think ultimately, she is true to her cause, and that's really admirable. And there needs to be more people like that in the Democratic Party, because that's one of the main appeals to Trump, is that he's true to his cause, and he's been consistent on his messaging for a long, long time. And he's not there because he's, in the pocket of special interests or whatever. He doesn't take huge donations from super PACs or whatever and all this kind of thing, who are going to sort of pressure him into putting through certain legislation or whatever. He's his own man for the most part, and he basically goes, well, I believe in this and this and this, and then he just tries and does it, but he is always fighting against the swamp.
Yeah, true. But in fairness, so is Bernie Sanders, but we don't want to see him as president, right? But what's so appealing about Tulsi is she's true to the original tenets of the Democratic Party. So, okay, I believe in less state, but a Democrat can win me over by saying, look, okay, we need to increase the state's presence in this sector. We need to give them a bit more funding for this effect. And, I don't agree and note with zero taxes, so I can be swayed by that argument. And Tulsi is one of those people, right? She's not interested in turning the Democrats into the party of racial justice. She's not interested in turning it into the party of, racial equity. What she's interested in is very sensible, centrist, democratic ideals, and just a little bit more spending, right? Which is what I think it should be. Politics should ultimately be tweaking numbers.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I kind of do. I do agree to a certain extent, yeah. the kind of like the onus should be on. The
Individual.
default position is that you don't tax, right? Like obviously there's going to be some taxes, but the default position is that you don't tax, right? Like, so the thing is about capitalism. I know, God, I don't want to go on a massive tangent here, but the thing about capitalism is you need to have protection of property for capitalism to work, right? And you need to have a kind of legal court by which people can dispute things. Otherwise, it's just anarchy. So that's why the government, that's the main purpose of the government, is to protect property, right? And to settle disputes with impartiality. So, that's the police and the court system, right? So that's, yes, okay, you've made your case then for the taxes there. So everything beyond that, though, is you need to make a case for it. The onus is on the government to say, yeah, we need this money for this specific thing. But like you say, I think the best way to be is not to like be ideologically driven one way or the other and say no spending or no taxes or yes, taxes for everything. It should be, well, make the argument for what you want to do. And, if I'm sort of on board with the idea, then yeah, absolutely. Because, spending money on like, building roads is something that basically people are behind the idea of that. Building and maintaining roads. That's something that the government does with tax money. That's something that people are generally behind the idea of. If you can make a case for other things that, yeah, we want to spend tax money on this specific thing and you get a mandate for that, then great. The government, though, most governments, I think, in the West have become just incredibly frivolous with the things that they spend money on, and we waste a huge amount of taxpayers' money that could be going back into the economy and creating more everything is wasted on just these, sort of ridiculous projects and things that aren't going anywhere.
I mean, I'm very fond of telling people the story, but I live in a country where you have a 55% income tax rate on almost every job. 55% tax, okay? And so what that translates to is utter inefficiency, because the state has a mountain of money and it doesn't know what to do with it. So it ends up funding people to dig holes and people to come and fill them in after them. It's utterly ridiculous. But I think also what matters is how you raise tax revenue. So if you speak to any lefty, any self-respecting lefty, they support a wealth tax, okay? But again, what for? Okay, they want to tax rich people simply to punish them. They want to put a tax on rich people because they think rich people should be paying more into society. They don't say, oh, we should tax the rich and fund this project with it, or we need to raise 250 million, and the best way to do that would be to slap a wealth tax on. By the way, wealth taxes don't work, but whatever. I'm taking it from a leftist position. They do it as a punitive policy, and that is utterly ridiculous. With taxation, it should be treated exactly as any other kind of a transaction in a shop. You should get a receipt for your taxes. You should get a receipt, and it should tell you, okay, this you paid $8,000 in taxes this year, and 1,000 of that was spent on infrastructure, 1,000 of that was spent on policing, so on and so forth. Because of course, if you're giving your money to it, you should be able to demand to see what your money is being used for. That's what I think. It shouldn't just go into the murky depths of a state and then some fucking bureaucrat decides what to do with it, because that's utterly untransparent.
Yeah, this always makes me laugh when I think, well, this makes me laugh, it actually makes me depressed. When I think about what the Democratic Party has become in America now, they've basically got in bed with the same institutions that they're supposed to hate. So people like Facebook and Twitter and all that, they don't really pay that much taxes at all. They have monopolies in their industries. They avoid taxes, and they destroy small business. Same with Amazon, they destroy small businesses, right? And make it impossible for them to compete. They undermine the things that. They undermine capitalism. They undermine the structure of capitalism that increases that kind of competitiveness, and ultimately results in a net gain for everyone as a whole. And the left used to be against it. I remember being a young lefty who was like, oh, yes, the bigger businesses aren't have a monopoly. They lobby government to get away with what they're doing, and they give themselves an unfair advantage by taking advantage of the sort of political institutions that we have. And I was like, this is a bad thing. What are we going to do about it? They seem to have lost that concern now. They're not bothered about that anymore. They're happily get in bed with these institutions if they help them win elections. So they've lost complete sense of, I think they've lost a sense of identity now, the Democratic Party. I don't know what they stand for anymore, but they don't stand for anything, as far as I can see, that actually means anything. The only thing they stand for is actually just getting into power. I know it's funny because they say the same thing about Republicans. That's true. Many Republicans only want to be in power for the sake of being in power. They want to get elected, re-elected, just to be in power. That's it. They just like doing it. They don't particularly care about anything else beyond that. It's almost like, just being high up on that ladder. It's a status thing for them. They just want to have that high status and be, oh yeah, I'm a senator, I'm a congressman, a congresswoman. That's all they're actually concerned about. And that's true. And I think that's something that is completely missed. And I said, obviously I said before earlier on, but it's completely missed by so many people on the left. They still are really, really cemented in this idea of right v left. Oh, it's the Democrats v the Republicans. It's like, no, there's actually loads and loads of people who support Trump and hate the Republicans because they see them as part of the swamp. They see them as part of this establishment that does not care about ordinary people.
Exactly. But should we look at one person who doesn't fall into the categories of people you're mentioning? And we mentioned her before, Tulsi. So we're quite big fans of Tulsi, aren't we?
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. What I like about Tulsi Gabbard is that she is she has the right values in the sense that she's not afraid to speak out against the mob of the Democrats. She runs as Democrats. She risks being ostracized from the party. She risks her career being destroyed by the radical left to just kind of stand up for what she believes in. And obviously, because she's a somewhat... I mean, I don't know personally, obviously, but we've come to different conclusions about in terms of policy on some things, which is fine because obviously people's ideas about the right thing to do is based upon their lived experience. But we come to disagreements on certain things, but she seems to be true to her beliefs, which is admirable because it's quite refreshing. It's very easy for Democrats now to just bow down to the various different mobs. To be like, oh no, I don't want to be the next person that's defeated in a primary by the Justice Democrats or whatever. So I'm just going to, give them lip service and try and appease them. She's admirable because she actually just kind of stands for what she genuinely believes in. And whether or not you agree with it, it doesn't really matter. It's nice to just have genuine people in politics. But anyway, she has introduced a bill, and this kind of goes back to that transgender debate that we were talking about last week, but kind of another facet of that debate. She's introduced a bill that said it would only allow biological females in women's sports. And so Democratic Hawaii Representative Tulsi Gabbard and Republican Oklahoma Representative Mark Wayne Mullen introduced legislation that would clarify Title IX protections for female athletes as based on biological sex. A press release said Thursday, the Protect the Women's Sports Act recognizes the different abilities conferred by the biological sex. The statement said Title IX protects people from discrimination based on sex in education programs or activities that receive federal funding. Title IX was a historic provision championed by Hawaii's own Congresswoman Patsy Mink in order to provide equal opportunity for women and girls in high schools and college sports. it led to generational shift that impacted countless women, creating life-changing opportunities for girls and women that never existed before. However, Title IX is being weakened by some states who are misinterpreting Title IX, creating uncertainty, undue hardship, and lost opportunities for female athletes. Our legislation protects Title IX's original intent, which was based on the general biological distinction between men and women athletes based on sex. Title IX was designed to give women and girls an equal chance to succeed, including in sports. Allowing biological males to compete in women's sports diminishes that equality and takes away from the original intent of Title IX. And actually, I think this is kind of an interesting angle to attack the whole sort of transgender argument of like transgender, men or women being able to compete in those respective brackets or whatever, or categories of the sport, is that the sort of spirit of Title IX is that it's about the biological advantages that men have, obviously, the physical advantages that they have in certain sports. And that if you, just because, and in many ways, it's actually not even relevant to transgender rights or whatever, because, I'm led to believe, at least, that most people agree that there are men and women. Like, they may believe that there's a sort of fluidity to that, which, okay.
Problematic.
Yeah, they may believe there's a certain spectrum or fluidity to that, but ultimately they believe that, yes, there are such things as men and women. I know that there are some, obviously, people that don't think that, but when we've discussed this on the channel before, and people have come in with like contradicting views and comments or whatever, or on Reddit when we've posted it on there, they say, oh look, no, people on the left do believe that there is men and women. They just also, believe in the kind of fluidity of it or whatever, and that, there's good science to back up this or that. But this is kind of interesting when they're talking about Title IX, they're saying, well, no, because the kind of sentiment, the idea behind the law is that, yes, men have that physical advantage. So if you have someone that's biologically born as a male that transitions to a woman, then obviously it destroys that advantage. So it's quite a clever argument, really, I think.
Torn by it because I'm not sure, because this is the first time I'm seeing this, so I'm not too sure as to the scope of the proposed policy and things. But for example, it mentioned education, right? So I'm assuming, there's a difference between like a sports lesson when it's literally like there's no competition involved, right? It's people learning how to do the sports, perhaps seeing if they have any talent for it, and they're staying fit. And if you are a woman who was originally born a man and you've gone through all the requisite changes and stuff, and you have a feminine body, there's no real reason you should be with the males in that. In fact, it's probably going to do very bad for you if you're with the males in that. Now, in a competitive scenario, when there's like, it's the Olympics or it's something that.
Oh dear. Hello?
Or it's, well, yeah, that's, hello?
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, you just got out slightly again. Go on.
Oh, my internet's not very good today.
No.
So when there is a competitive element to something, well, you have to kind of say there is a restriction, and we might not be able to guarantee participation for every single Apache attack helicopter that comes along. Because yes, there are certain advantages, and it is very difficult to account for everything. And I'm not too sure of the scope of the law. I would say when it comes to non-competitive things, whatever goes. When it comes to competitive things, probably maybe Tulsi has the right idea, although I'm open to arguments.
Well, I've kind of wrestled with this idea a little bit. And I don't see a solution. I mean, the way I see it, there's three solutions. Solution one is that you remove the brackets or categories or whatever, the classifications of sports, whether it be men and women or whatever, and you just say, right, everyone's in one thing then. Okay, so in the Olympics, there's just the 100-meter sprint, and that's it. You can do that. Obviously, it's just going to be dominated by men. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like a very good solution to me. The other solution would be that you just say that you have to compete in the category that's based upon your birth gender as opposed to the one that you've transitioned into, which seems perfectly reasonable to me as well. And then the third one would be that you have specific category for transgender men and transgender women, and then make that another category, another distinction. It just seems like the best one is to go for the middle one, really, which is just that if you're born a man, then you compete in the men's sport. It's not to say that people can't recognize you as a woman, if you want them to, obviously, but because you have that advantage, the physical advantage, you have to compete in that. You still have to compete in that category. Surely there isn't anyone. Okay, there probably are, but surely everyone can see that there is an advantage that comes, a physical advantage, with being born as a male who's then transitioned to a female and competing in female sports. Surely people can see that advantage. So it doesn't seem too far-fetched, shall we put it, to expect those people to then be competing in with the males. And you can just reclassify it as biologically born male category or whatever if you want, but ultimately it's about maintaining that competitive spirit, and you can't have that if people can just transition or identify as another sex and then compete against that sex when obviously there's physical differences.
Yeah, and just before someone strawmans you, you were saying that there is a clear advantage that comes with if you were born a man and transitioned to being a woman, for example. And when you say that argument, what a lot of people will hear is Park episode when you had like a typical biker dude who was competing in women's sports and smashing everything because he was a biker dude with big muscles, but he just said, "Oh, I identify as a woman." That's not the case, and the thing that proves the case is, do you remember Caster Semenya, who is a South African athlete who she was born with a Y chromosome or something, but she developed a vagina. Anyway, she was a woman, right? But there was for some reason, she had an elevated level of testosterone as a result of the circumstances of her birth. And there was a huge debate as to whether she should be allowed to compete because she had a physical advantage. She was a naturally born woman, but she had an elevated testosterone level, and therefore she was deemed. The arguments put forth were that she had an unfair advantage equivalent to a performance-enhancing drug. So, in theory, you could be a man, you transition to a woman, and you have the most feminine body in the world. You will still have an advantage over a female sports person, and a naturally born female sports person, right? So before someone strawmans you and says like that's an argument against you, this is all like backed up by the science that these people enjoy a competitive advantage. Now, the policies have to protect the majority of people. Okay, I don't think policies should have to specifically account for the 2 people in the world who are very serious sports people and they're transgender. That's very few people in the world, right? And so, as sad as it is, I think we might just have to say, in the interest of the common good, we might just have to let those few people down in order to have a very sensible policy that reasonably works for everybody.
Well, are we letting them down though? Because they're not. They can still compete. I mean, I don't know the specifics of this case that you just talked about. If someone has a, is they're either a man or a woman. Like, did you say that they have an XY chromosome, but they have vagina or something like that? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so basically they were born with a Y chromosome, right?
Right.
At least as I recall from the top of my head. But
Yeah.
the testes matured inside the body, but they didn't mature properly, and it grew into a vagina. So it was kind of like similar to these people who are both genders.
Okay.
In a way.
So they have a kind of advantage in male sports then, if they were to compete in male sports. Is that basically?
No. She's a woman.
Yeah.
And she competes in female sports. However, there was an argument that she should be banned because of her elevated level of testosterone, which gave her a competitive advantage in female sports.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Which is quite an interesting parallel, isn't it?
It is an interesting one. I'd probably say in that one, you probably just let them compete in the female sports because they are female. Yeah, they just have high levels of testosterone than normal females, or the average female, shall we say. But
I think this is what happened. But the argument was that it's equivalent to taking a performance-enhancing drug, the advantages you receive.
I know, but that's just, I mean, where do you draw the line then? Because then you say, do you say, oh, this person has high levels of this, whatever hormone is irrelevant to sex, and that hormone helps them competitively. It's like, well, yeah, there's a genetic component to sports, right? Some people have more of a predisposition to being good at certain sports than other people. That's why, that's just the way it is. As long as they're not cheating, then they have a genetic advantage is what they have. And it's like, well, yeah, everyone has a genetic advantage to some degree at sports. Some people are going to be more, like you would expect someone with really good genetic hand-eye coordination, to be like a good darts player or whatever, right? But you wouldn't be like, oh, well, we're going to have to do a test on your DNA to check that your hand-eye coordination genes aren't like too good. It's like, no, that's the thing, right? That's the whole point.
Well, yeah.
I know that's
male, female, and you're taking the male gene and
yeah. No, I know. Obviously, I just trying to use that as an analogy for that point, but I don't know. I don't know specifics of that case. What I would say is, though, if you're someone that's born genetically as a female and you transition to a male, but you're an athlete, what are the downsides to competing in female sports? Exactly in that scenario. Well, I guess they basically have taken performance enhancing drugs at that point, haven't they? Because they're probably taking testosterone at that point. Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a real difficult one. I think possibly then the only real solution, if you want females to actually be able to win physical sports, is for transgenders there to be separate groups for transgenders. I don't really see any other way around it.
Problem, if female soccer is struggling to get by, then transgender soccer might be a bit of a push, but that might just have to be the
well, I don't see what other solution that there is. I mean, what other solution is there that's fair?
That's what well, that circles back to Tulsi's point.
Yeah,
which is saying we might just have to disappoint those transgender people and say, okay, listen, if you're transgender, fair enough, but probably you don't really have a category to compete in.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, things should change with the times, I guess, to a certain extent. You know, I'm not entirely convinced behind the supposed science of transgenderism. I think we're not entirely sure on that one just yet. And if it does come to the day where they say, oh, no, look, here's a very clear evidence to suggest that, you know, this is a real phenomenon, and that cosmetic surgery and hormone treatment is the best way to help people, and if the science really suggests that, and there's a real clear consensus on it, which I know some people might say there is, I don't think there is, then I would be for it. It just doesn't seem right to me that it does. I don't think that will be the case, but if that is the case, then obviously the law's got to move on with the times. I really don't know what the solution is though to the issue. I don't think you can tarnish the competitive nature of sports by allowing people that have that, you know, advantage. I guess, like, I don't know. Maybe another option might be to lax the laws in terms of like drugs and things that athletes can take.
Well, no, I think that's in opposition to the competitive spirit. But you know, we're not lawmakers. You know, I think you know, because if you're asking us to come up with a solution for this, we're not going to be able to. But within terms, so kind of wrapping it up there, because I think this is the end of the stream. Going back to what tools he's proposed, are you in favour limiting sports to biological females?
Yes. Are you?
It's a lot more difficult when it's the way around.
Exactly. That's why I was exploring the different things, the different options.
Am I in favour? Can I have a cop out? And yes, but it's possible to become a biological female. No, I can't, can I? That's ridiculous. No, I'd say I'm not in favour of this, and I think there needs to be a bit more nuance to the argument, and she needs to come back with something updated. I think she's fair. I think it's fairly sensible, but I think maybe we have to do a bit more for trans people in this, from my gut instinct.
Really? That surprises me. I don't really see. Well, I don't really see that you can allow transgender people with a clear physical advantage to compete in. Well, look, we're only talking about one. We're talking about biological women. No, we're talking about biological men transitioning to women competing in women's sports. That's what we're talking about. Obviously, they have a clear physical advantage. I don't see what other option there is other than to not allow them to compete in that category. They cannot compete as women. They can't do it.
Why isn't that a default anyway?
That should be the default, yeah. But so I basically am in support of that idea. I just don't see how you can allow them to do it, because they would obviously have such a physical advantage that they would dominate.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That is what you're saying, right? Okay.
Well, what I'm kind of saying is, what they should do is, if we explored every possible end, and eventually we arrived at, listen, these people are always going to have an advantage, and it's going to damage women's development, biological women's development, then we might just have to ban it. We should explore every single possibility and every single opportunity to allow trans people to compete as normal before we get there. And so that's why I would say not a fan of this Tulsi's thing, because I haven't seen every single loose end explored yet. But I think it should be the default until a better solution is found.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think yeah, that's basically fine. I don't know of any other solutions though. Right now, I think you just have to do it, or it tarnishes the competitive spirit. So
And it's above our pay grade.
yeah, and it's obviously incredibly easy to exploit. So, there's just another argument against it. But anyway,
Well, let's leave it there.
yeah. Anyway, so yeah, let's call the end to that. We've this has been an enjoyable one, actually. It's nice to get some comments from people and have a little bit of conversation, a bit of back and forth, which obviously, until I think we've sort of been doing this for a little while, we're not going to get people who, I guess, like the marketing of it, you know, the people who are like aware, oh yeah, it's the Sunday, you know.
1 second. We're not wrapping up. Adam Rockford, hello to you. I've not seen you in the comment section ever, so I think this is your first time of our channel, so welcome. The argument comes down to natural versus unnatural. Hermaphroditism, rare as it is still natural. Hormone treatment isn't. Performance enhancing drugs aren't. That's a fairly reasonable argument.
Yeah, I mean, just before we close off then, I think ultimately that's, yeah, so with hermaphrodites, I think...
But that's the Caster Semenya case.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like I was saying, I think, yeah, you just got to know that. I think the problem with hermaphrodites is like you need to be able to classify them in one group or the other. That's the issue. Not whether or not they should be able to compete, but whether or not, or choose which one they compete in. But you need to be able to classify them in some way to say, oh no, you're male or female. Assuming that we're only sticking with the two groups. So that's the issue with that, I think. But otherwise, yeah, like definitely. I mean, it's somewhat, like I said, talking about, it's easy to manipulate. Someone can, and I don't know like how many of these people exist, but surely some of them do. Someone can take hormone treatment, take hormones, shall we say, to transition, so that they can say that they're now transgender and compete in another category, when obviously they have all the physical advantages of being male. So
what happens? I think perhaps we need to learn a bit more, because you say hormone treatment isn't natural, right? So what happens? You're a male, you take the hormone treatment, you transition to a female. Would you still have to keep on with the hormone treatment to maintain your femininity?
yeah,
Or once you get the slip and everything, would you?
yeah, you do.
Because you have no. Okay. Because I was going to say, there are people out there who say, well, transgenderism is natural. It happens naturally,
right.
and they would say that.
Yeah, well,
the hormone treatment is essentially a medicine in the same way as taking paracetamol for a headache.
Yeah.
So the argument's about naturality.
Yeah,
well,
I don't think
there's
enough science to make that argument just yet, though. That's the issue. It could well be that science, like I said, prevails, that shows that, yes, look, here's a very clear thing that we can identify and call this transgenderism or whatever. And then here's the way in which we help people that are suffering from this or whatever. I don't know, because it's difficult. So you've got to be difficult with your terminology. And I don't want to ramble on now, but it's like, if I've come across the situation where I've said, oh, okay, so how do we treat people with transgender? And they said, transgenderism isn't something that should be treated. Because then they equate it to like homosexuality, and they say, oh, being homosexual there's nothing wrong with that, which obviously there isn't. There's nothing being wrong with homosexual. And they'll equate that to like people who have like tried to treat homosexuality. And it's like, well, hold on. If there needs to be a process that someone that's transgender needs to go through, that is by definition the treatment, is it not? So it's like, there's no words that you can use to describe that are going to like appease everyone, you know, with it. Because I'm sure there's some transgender people who do see it as a treatment. But
this is why cancel culture is such a problem, because it
Yeah.
restricts this debate, for example. And I think we're both fairly open. We're open to being told we're wrong and stuff, but we're kind of like having to like dance around our words because we don't want to, like, we actually don't want to offend anyone, right? Like, that's just the thing. But at the same time, we don't want someone calling up our employers and getting us fired because of something when we have no intent to offend someone either.
Yeah.
So cancel culture bad.
Well, that's it. That's cancel culture, and that's why that way of thinking is obviously never going to be a solution to anything good, because it's suppressing one side of the argument. Anyone with any common sense knows that. So,
So thanks for the comment, Adam. I suspect you're a bit behind because that was the Casta Semenya argument, and we are a few minutes ahead. But thanks so much for the comment, but I think we're going to wrap it up, aren't we?
Yes, indeed. So we just to let you know, obviously we do these live streams every Sunday now, and yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's really enjoyable. It's something different each week where we talk about some of this different stuff, and obviously we're just trying to encourage people to come and join in and chat away, because ultimately it's about that conversation between the viewer and the presenter. I don't know. So yeah, please, if you did tune in and you did enjoy it, then next time, please do give us a bit of a chat, something that we can respond to and facilitate a bit of conversation and a bit of back and forth. But until, sorry, go on.
Oh, 1 second, yeah, and I just want to give a very quick shout out to freedomfirstpress.com. We haven't finalized anything yet, but it seems we're going to be looking to partnering up with those guys. It's a great new website, lots of good conservative news, got lots of good I mean, you hear it in the name, freedomfirstpress.com. So looks like we're going to be partnering up with them, although we've not finalized it yet. So quick shout out to those guys.
Yeah, cool. And that should be interesting, actually, to see what goes on there in the future. Hopefully, we're going to have a little bit of a collaboration with other people. But yeah, anyway, I'm rambling on now. So until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.